This conference will now be recorded.
All right. Well, thank you for making it on. Welcome to the virtual BrainTrust, and I am Dr. Sean Drake, and I've got with me Nyree White. She is literally a freaking rock star when it comes to softball. It's been amazing getting to know you and seeing all the success that you've had. And just in the last, I had Monica Abbott on yesterday talking about mental health of the athlete right now in softball, or just period. And having the opportunity to have you here, especially in this virtual world that we're in at this moment in quarantine, and that's where you and I can on how can we help these young players that are either quarantined, stuck in isolation, social distancing, from your perspective. So tell us a little bit about you. What obviously, brick wall softball. Tell us a little bit about that, and then we'll go into the actual talk.
Yeah, so I played softball all my life. My dad was a men's fast pitch pitcher, so I grew up around the game, fell in love with pitching when I was really young. Played at Stanford University, played for Team New Zealand and the under-19 Team USA. And since I've become a coach, for the last about 10 years, I've been giving pitching instruction. I've been full-time about a year and a half now. I live in Austin, Texas, and I do a lot of online work. I started getting into online instruction about a year and a half ago. And right now I'm really glad I did that because I do feel prepared that I'm able to help people during this time. And honestly, what I'm telling a lot of my students is I think this is a great opportunity. And I think it's really difficult. I think it's very challenging. But I think these are all lessons of the things that we're learning right now are all lessons that we really need to learn as athletes, but also as part of a broader community, right? I think sports, this is a good way to learn, whether it's through time, your career ends, whether it is through an injury, an unexpected kind of break in your season, or it's a freak event like this, a kind of a global pandemic. We have to learn at some point that sports are always a privilege and never a given, and that we need to make the most of every opportunity we have, whether it comes in the form that we want it to or not. We have to make the most of what we're dealt. So I think right now, honestly, with sports performance training, there are so many things that we can do at home and on our own that we typically don't do because it's a lot more comfortable to learn from someone else in person. But I think this is a really good challenge for young athletes to take a little bit more ownership and be able to, like, say with, for example, with online instruction, you really have to take in information and figure out what am I doing that's different than what I want to be doing. For a lot of young athletes, this is really helpful for proprioception and figuring out feel and what am I actually doing. And it's a great opportunity to break down mechanically and develop in a way that we typically don't have the time to do or the opportunity to do. Say, example, in season here in Texas, we play year round, which think of that what you will. A lot of times kids don't have time to kind of fix either mobility and strength issues that are showing up, or able to address the mechanical and highly technical developmental side of pitching. And so this is a great kind of golden window for that, to take a step back, to control our volume a little bit more, like not pitching 500 pitches in a week the way that a lot of young kids are now, and control that volume and develop.
No, I think that you said a few things there that were really like gems. Number one is being able to hold responsibility for yourself. I think that's a big key thing as athletes that we're going to talk about on this. Number two, using the space that you have to perform with what you have. I think that's a really key thing. You don't need a lot of space. And the third thing is understanding the mobility, stability, and strength area that you have at home, and not knowing maybe that you have some physical limitations that you've ignored because you're constantly playing over and over and over every week. You don't have that time to slow down and really say, like, where are my strengths, where are my deficiencies, and can I really hammer on those while I'm in quarantine, right?
Yes.
So from that perspective, I think that's, obviously you're one of our advisors on Base U for the, fast pitch softball. And it's been interesting to me having USA in, the last couple weeks ago and working with a lot of high-end, pitchers right now, how many limitations there are in our female softball players, especially in fast pitch. And, talent overrides some of that. We're not saying that a movement screen is going to dictate what you're going to do. It's just going to maybe explain why you do what you do, right? So I want to talk a little bit about your thoughts right now on the body physical limitations of the pitcher. And maybe, because obviously you can coach from a distance right now, which I think is super important. How does that correlate? Like, how does the body correlate to the pitching off the mound?
Absolutely. I think for a long time, we had this myth that pitching is somehow not a highly athletic movement, there was sort of this joke going around that pitchers aren't the best athletes on the team. And I think it's really, really important to understand pitching is incredibly explosive, dynamic, complex movement. And it can be pretty simple when it's instructed properly, but it is very complex on the demands on the body, especially the amount of impact landing, the force on the knees and the back. That's something that we really underestimate in pitching. And I also see a lot of back injuries, knee injuries that way. And then we're also really underestimating the demands on the core and how stable we need to be in the pitch, and also the amount of force that's on our shoulder and possibly on our elbow when we're not pitching correctly, and how we need to train and take care of our arms. The shoulder distraction forces are basically the same as baseball, but we really underestimate it because of this myth that pitching is natural, right? And so I'm seeing this show up in a lot of different ways, but all of these core, we have like a list of 100 common problems, right? Whether it's the drag leg is dragging backwards, anchor drag, whether it is front sides giving out, whether it's all these different things. But what it comes down to is this pitcher able to be stable enough when she's landing? Does she have the stability in her core that she needs? Is she able to create acceleration through her shoulder? And all these things come down to a set of core abilities or core skill sets that we're not training movement pattern wise in pitchers. And so we're constantly treating problems without really seeing the underlying factors that we need just athletically as an athlete on the mound, which are, like I mentioned, single leg stability, explosiveness, the ability to hip hinge and have good hip mobility, core strength, the ability to have good shoulder stability, all these other aspects that we're not really addressing.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think that goes into our philosophy of the style of pitching, right? Like, we don't believe there's one way to pitch in softball. There's an infinite number of ways, but there's one efficient way for your athlete to do it. It's based on what they can physically do. And so there's so many coaches right now that have an idea or a style of what, because Lisa Fernandez pitched that way, or Monica Abbott does, or Osterman, or you go down the list, or yourself, and well, then you have to pitch this way. Well, can their body physically do what you're asking them to do is like the big thing that I've really enjoyed talking to you about. Is that if their body physically can't do it, it's like we're taking a Ferrari, or they're taking a Pinto and putting a Ferrari engine in it and having it drive. And it's going to drive for a minute, but then it's going to break down. And that's one thing that I really like about your style of coaching, is that you don't have one style. You have multiple styles based on what that athlete can physically do. So for athletes that are home right now, what are some of the things that you would recommend? I think number one. Number two, how important and easy is distance coaching right now? Like, what are some ways that they can start to utilize that skill set of working with the coach virtually? And then number three, I think the big thing is, can we give them a couple, tips from coaching style or coaching tips that they can do at home? I'll give them a couple of corrective exercises. I think that might be able to help them at home. And then, we can go from there.
Yeah, awesome. So your first question was kind of a game plan. And I think it's difficult because we don't know the period of time that we're dealing with. I think it's safe to say until we get back on the field, it's going to be at least 4 weeks. We don't really know, but to me, it helps to know, okay, I at least have a few weeks because I'm going to prioritize my skill sets based on time. So I would spend at least 2 weeks, 3 weeks, ideally, focusing on 1 to 2 major mechanical elements that we want to improve. And that takes a little bit of time, and it takes a single-minded focus. And so I want to make sure I kind of take some things off of the to-do list, and I really dedicate myself to 4 days a week, 3, 4, 5 days a week of intense breakdowns with patience and really systematically working through the mechanical element that you really see as like the core thing holding you back velocity wise, or maybe if there's something contributing to injury, that would be top of the list, right? Say, because volume is about to increase a ton. When these kids come back to pitching in summer, as it always does, that volume is massive. And so we want to take advantage of this time period when we are able to break things down. It's really difficult to fix mechanics sometimes in season because you get kind of caught in this in between. When you show up for game day, you have to just throw with what you've got, right? Sure. And so it helps a lot if we can master those things in the next 3 weeks. And I think people are young kids especially, are capable of making a lot more change physically than we typically think. We often have this story that changing mechanics is really difficult. And I think some of that comes down to not understanding techniques and system and process of how to create physical change and movement patterns, and not having clarity on exactly what we're trying to do and how to get there. So to answer your question, I think there's a bunch of great resources out there online. I have a pitching blueprint program. It's literally everything that I would teach in the first 2 to 3 months of training an athlete in person. It's a very systematic and sequential approach. So I go through the 7 key movement patterns that all elite pitchers have in common. And then we also discuss style and how that'll look different for different body types, different heights, and different movement abilities, right? So I'm really, really proud of that program. It's basically everything I've learned over the last 20 years put into a program. We do a lot of video analysis of elite level pitchers, and it's a very complete mechanics breakdown. And it's the exact same thing I would do in person. So I have that. I also have video analysis available. All these links are on my Facebook page or my social media, and just message me if you'd like those links. But there's a ton of different things out there. And also, I think sometimes we underestimate the things that we already know. We're always looking for more information. We're always looking for different stuff. And I think a lot of people already know what they need to do. They're just always looking externally for different things. And I think with video now, especially, just taking the time to video yourself on day one, if you're starting a little quarantine program right now, just video yourself, put yourself side by side with Amanda Scarborough or next to Rachel Garcia or Monica Abbott, and just see what you see, right? Have the patience to sit down and study the craft for a moment. And that's a really good place to start if you don't have the resources to purchase a program or something like that.
Yeah, I think that's a really key. I'm going to tag on to that real quick. For those athletes that are going to do that, if you ever put yourself with another athlete beside you, understand that you may not physically be able to do that, and don't be discouraged if you're not there. Understand that, working with a coach like Nyree, or like we're working with some of our other professionals, to where they can actually break you out and spend the time of doing like a screen to see if your body fits again. That's how we're going to make you the most efficient. But what I do love is how you said go back to basics. This is something that my buddy Brian from Agatsky, Brian Bradley, and I were just talking about, is getting back to basics of anything, right? Like this is the time to press reset. Like we tend to get into season and we're so focused on what we're doing in the season that we forget the foundation that created that opportunity for us to perform, right? And so what do you think are the top, and we'll go over some correctives here at the end, but what do you think are some of the top things that make a great fast pitch pitcher? Like what are the things that make a great fast pitch pitcher?
Yeah. The ability to we talk about leg drive all the time. I think every pitcher has had the experience of being yelled at, like, use your legs, use your legs. And what I found is that young pitchers especially, but even advanced pitchers in college, have no idea what we're talking about when we say use your legs. And so getting very specific about my ability to hinge at the beginning of the pitch and to shift my weight explosively, to recruit my glutes, activate my glutes, and drive through my feet off of the mound. I think a lot of young pitchers don't understand ground force, don't understand how to apply power into the ground, and we're just sort of straightening our legs instead of actually applying power. So that's a great place to start. And pitching is so much like a domino effect. The first thing affects the next thing, and so many different things can be improved just by improving lower body strength, single leg stability, explosiveness, and balance off of the mound. Then from there, I think some of the most common issues that I see have to do with extension. It's kind of a one thing that can adjust a lot of different things. It's just the ability to get to full extension in the middle of the pitch can help with alignment, can help with landing, and a bunch of different things. And then also hip mobility. I think this is one of the most restrictive factors that I'm seeing in pitchers is we don't know how to get extended, and we don't know how to internally rotate our back knee and drive through the end of the pitch. And so to me, it all starts with the lower body, making sure, obviously, we have a good arm care program as well. And we're also getting some good core stability, and all of those things are important, but starting from the ground up is typically the best place to start.
Cool. And for, maybe a young athlete that's looking to become obviously a better pitcher, or maybe they're a hitter and they're in another position, they want to be a pitcher. We're going to go through a couple screens that I think are important for that internal rotation of the hips and then looking at some extension. But what kind of advice would you give them right now? Like, imagine being a senior and having your senior year taken away. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like all of a sudden you've got, no prom, you've got no, senior softball season. You don't have your travel ball anymore. And you've got all these girls and friends and everything else. What are some things that you're doing in your life, or that if you were in that situation, what's some advice that you would give them?
Yeah. First of all, you're going to feel it. I think people right now all around the world are going through different things, and sometimes we tend to invalidate what we're feeling because it's like, oh, some people are literally afraid for their lives right now, and so sometimes we feel like guilty about, feeling disappointed about our seasons, and these things seem relatively small, but they're not small. They're big to us, and especially, you know, young athletes. That's literally what your life has revolved around, what you've dedicated yourself to. So it is okay to feel, you know, devastated, sad, and to feel that first, like feel it. And then, okay, take a deep breath. We're going to regather. What do I have moving forward? How can I make the most of this situation? And I think ultimately, I think all of us are going to appreciate our ability to play a little bit more after this. But you got to feel it first. And it's been really sad not being able to see my athletes in person. I mean, I'm feeling this as much as anyone else. I feel really, really blessed given my situation here. I have family close by. You know, I'm able to work remotely and online, so I feel like I'm, you know, in a very fortunate position. But you know, I think we're all struggling with this in different ways, and so we got to just accept that first. Second, I like to really take in outside perspective. So whenever when my own kind of internal dialogue isn't at its best, I really like to either get the perspectives of the people around me who I trust, or open up a book, listen to a podcast, get some other information coming in that's not the sound of my own voice, and connect in whatever way we can. I think we're really fortunate online options right now to FaceTime with family and all of that. But yeah, I think radical acceptance. Acceptance is something that I think we struggle with a lot as a society, and also as athletes. We're used to being able to do something about everything. It's like we don't ever accept it as it is. But some things we do have to accept before we can move forward. And then I would just, okay, take a breath. I have this amount of time. What could I do? What's the one thing that would make the biggest impact for me right now? How can I kind of be very present in what I'm doing right now? I think softball right now can be a very therapeutic thing in our life right now, because you can go out in the yard, you can play catch, you can simplify a little bit. And before you get into all the training and all of that, don't be afraid to just go in the yard and play catch. Like, get back to like, okay, hey dad, let's go play catch, and find a little bit of joy in that. And that's okay too, to take a second before we dive into the training aspect.
No, I love that. Finding joy is such a big thing right now, because a lot of people are confused, and they have different emotions, right? With your time at Stanford, like, that had been pretty amazing. Obviously a phenomenal school. What are some of the lessons that you learned when you were in college, like especially as a player, as an individual, and as a human coming out of college? What are some of the lessons that you learned during that time, softball related, and then obviously like life related?
Yeah, I think that I learned that struggle doesn't necessarily mean that I'm weak. I think I was incredibly hard on myself for struggling and looking around and assuming that other people weren't struggling as well. I was like, why can they handle this when I can't handle this? And I think acknowledging that the more you go after things, the more vulnerable you make yourself, because I'm really invested and I care deeply about what I'm doing. And I'm also working to the point of exhaustion, not sleeping very much, sometimes not taking care of myself, and just understanding that's a part of doing big things, is that you do make yourself vulnerable to, you know, fatigue and just getting overwhelmed. And so I learned an entirely new skill set, just in basically like taking care of myself, communicating. When I got into college, I didn't always know how to communicate with coaches well. That was a lesson that I learned. I did not know how to accept my role as it was, because I was always this competitor, like I want the ball all the time, and I didn't know how to make the most of the role that was given to me, and accept where I was at the time and just continue to move forward. And I also did not understand how to train independently. I think I had a set of expectations going into college that I was constantly frustrated when it wasn't meeting those expectations, instead of taking it as it was and getting creative and finding ways to get better. You know, I was always looking for something outside of myself to help me, and I needed to help myself a little bit more. So yeah, I think some of it was mental, and some of it was like actual tangible skill sets that I did not have in terms of communication, and all those things that I needed to learn. And I think life has a funny way of creating the situations for you that will teach you what you need to learn. And that's exactly what my time at Stanford did for me. It was the best decision I've ever made, was going to Stanford. It will continue to pay dividends my whole life, especially in the relationships that I built there with my friendships, and the community there is incredible. The stories that you hear from people. And when I was getting recruited, that's why I chose Stanford, is everyone mentioned the people. No one mentioned the networking. No one mentioned the things that you would think, right? Like, oh, like we love the status. It wasn't any of that. It was, I've met the most incredible people with the most amazing stories here, and that has taught me more than I even learned in the classroom.
What's one of those stories? Like, what can you pick one off the top of your head? And like, what was one story that sticks out in your head right now from being at Stanford?
Yeah, my roommate, her name is Shannon. She, and thank goodness at Stanford, our freshman year were roomed. We had to be roomed with someone who was not an athlete. And that was one of the best things that they ever did, because I think otherwise I never would have made friends outside of sports, because it's just, it's just easy to get immersed in that world. So I'm so grateful for that still. And she was incredibly artistic. I think she was feeling a lot of pressure to be a doctor. And I was so inspired by her and her choices to start her own business after college. She built this incredible marketing firm of her own in San Francisco, and she's just honestly a complete boss. But just watching her evolution to kind of reject, like, okay, I feel a pressure to do this. She explored a bunch of different majors and then eventually went her own way. But people from all different types of backgrounds, and we talk about diversity as this like abstract thing, but it's very tangible and real at Stanford, is just the variety of stories that you hear. People coming from different family backgrounds, different economic backgrounds. We had lots of people who were first generation college students. We had lots of people who won awards at the age of 16 that most people will never win in a lifetime. So just an incredible variation of stories and a lot of different skill sets. Like, I imagined that everyone would be into tech, everyone would be into, going to med school, but there were a lot of different creative majors, a lot of different skill sets that I wasn't expecting.
That's awesome. And so from this, obviously, we're transitioning to where you're at now. Tell us about like what's an everyday situation for you, like as a coach, a virtual coach, like doing what you're doing, building your business, like, because I think like especially women right now, young women, need really good role models. You're one of the top that I've had a chance to meet so far in the softball world, especially being at your age. I think it's so impactful what you're doing. So what's an everyday situation like for you pre-quarantine and now during quarantine? Where are you at?
Yeah, pre-quarantine, I was doing a ton of in-person training. That was still definitely the majority of my business. I also work with a package deal, so traveling around giving clinics that way. And I was planning to do an elite level college training program this summer. So having pitchers coming home from college come to Austin for a couple of weeks to train with me. But I'm really glad about a year and a half ago, I put together the Blueprint program. I did a 2-month online coaching program. I've been doing video analysis for years at this point. So a typical day was I would wake up, go work out, do whatever I need to do. My work hours are a little bit odd because I have to work when kids are out of school. So I give lessons from about 3:30 to 9:30. Sometimes I'll go to 10:30, get home at like 11. The facility is about an hour from where I live here in Austin, so I do commute quite a bit. And so the morning time before that is when I do all of my online business. After about noon, before noon, I do all of my kind of personal stuff, workout, all that. Afternoon, I do video analysis. I update new videos to the Blueprint, answer emails, all the administrative side of my business, handle scheduling. I think it's hilarious too. I had just kind of completely overhauled my scheduling. I got everyone in consistent slots every week, which was nightmare, like coordinating 50 schedules, and I'm like, oh, I'm feeling myself, I finally got this down, and then this whole thing happened. So yeah, it's definitely been challenging as a business owner, trying to learn in managing in-person business and learning online at the same time. And so I've been really aggressive in seeking like resources for that, purchased an online coaching program to teach me about online business development, and had to invest quite a bit in that. I've read a ton of books, listened to a ton of podcasts to try to develop myself as a business owner. And I've also been really fortunate with the mentors that I've had. And that was the first thing that I did when I decided I want to do this full time, was I sought out as many mentors as I could possibly have. And so if I can do that for the next generation, especially former female athletes who want to get into coaching, I think that is such an untapped resource. And former athletes have so much to bring to the coaching world that I think we're often not utilizing, and we underestimate the possibilities as for coaching as a career. I think we need to show, especially young former female athletes, how powerful a career in coaching can be and what the options are. I think there's a lot more that can be done than people think. They think of, oh, just lessons, or, oh, just, part-time on the weekend, but it really can be a career. So if I can help anyone that way, I'm always happy to be a mentor. Reach out to me. I'm always happy to help.
Well, I think it's amazing. So you mentioned the package deal, Jenna, the girls. I mean, you guys are amazing. Just to see how excited the kids are when they're working with you and to see the impact that you guys are having on softball, that's incredible.
Yep.
I think what we should do is let's plan another one where you and I pick a couple characteristics. I think this would be good for everybody with relation to pitching, and then we'll go through a couple screens and then some correctives and approaches that you think would be important. Just because I really wanted to make this more about where you see pitchers being in quarantine right now, and then knowing more about you, obviously. And then now taking it and showcasing like how easy it is, truly easy, distance coaching can be. Like, I think it's so important, whether it's, telemedicine, telehealth for me with my clients right now and patients, to you working with players. I don't want them to be discouraged. I think that this is a time of resetting, growing, and there's a lot of opportunity, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's so much more that can be done than we think. My dad taught himself how to pitch against a brick wall and literally became the best pitcher in the world. That's why I named my business Brick Wall Softball. I grew up in Eugene, Oregon, and 6 out of 12 months were spent inside in a net with no catcher, literally just pitching into a net. And I think that there's so much more that can be done instead of, looking to have a catcher, looking to have a coach all the time. That we all have the answers within ourselves right now, and I think we need to tap that.
Cool. So I tell you, let's figure out a Facebook Live time. And what we'll do is we'll go on Facebook Live. We'll both put it on our Instagrams, and we'll show you at home, if you're a softball player, what Nyree's talking about, especially with using extension in the body, using the hip internal rotation. We'll give you 2 or 3 screens that if you're not working, or if you're physically limited in those, how she can actually coach. We'll give you a couple of tips to coach around that, or we'll give you some corrective exercises to help you at home. So on behalf of me, I know you got a busy schedule right now, especially with this whole online thing. Thank you so much for making the time. Super grateful for your brain, for your passion, and for your love of softball, and just all that you give to everybody around.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. This is awesome.
Yeah, we'll be seeing you soon.
Cool.
All right, cheers.
Take care.